Paradox of Wokeness. Woke is one of those words that immediately triggers strong feelings in almost everyone who hears it. College campuses have gone woke. There's woke racism. Wokeness, depending on who you ask, is either out of control or not a thing at all. There's also a paradox at the heart of the word that very few people are talking about or even aware of. So today, I'm going to dig into what I call the paradox of wokeness. It's not what you think it is. So this isn't going to be a video about how the performatively woke are hypocritical or about how those decrying wokeness are playing their own identity politics game. The paradox of wokeness is much subtler than that. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones, and this is Language Jones. Wokeness as a term burst into American mainstream consciousness a few years ago and has spread globally. The French have, unsurprisingly, published a painfully French academic musing about le wokisme. Any cursory search will tell you the obvious, that it came from African American English, that it signifies being aware, and more specifically aware of injustice, and even more specifically aware of systems that lead to injustice. So it's in the same general intellectual strains as critical race theory, which is a legal theory about the creation, perpetuation, and enforcement of racism in legal structures, that situates both race and racism in institutions and structures and laws rather than individual prejudice and one-off interactions. I remember being flattered to be called woke by the dude who sold me a flat brim hat with Juan Carlos in the back of it in like 2013 because it literally had not entered the mainstream, and stay woke is the second highest compliment a white guy could get from a black man at that time after stay black. How the times have changed. In case you've been living under a rock, the term has morphed significantly and is now used largely as an epithet indicating not just interest in social justice, good, but a sanctimonious, uninformed, ignorant, hypocritical mob mentality that reproduces racist structures and hierarchies while claiming to fight them. Bad. Now, pejoration, the process whereby a word takes on a negative meaning, is not new or terribly interesting. I mean, I find it interesting, which is why I keep coming back to studying the euphemism treadmill, where our polite words for things become impolite because the concept taints the new word, but that's a me problem. But what's happening with woke is an overlooked phenomenon and one that I think plays a big role in American life, and of course, in the book that I'm currently writing. If you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications, you won't miss updates on that. Most of you probably know that woke originated in African American English, but what many people don't know is that African American English is not just a slang factory. It's a language variety all its own, with its own regionalisms and its own grammar, one which is more complex than classroom English. I've met tons of people who think that woke was a playful, slangy word like on fleek or no cap. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in a video explainer on why African American English grammar, especially around tense, aspect, and mood on verbs, is more complex and sophisticated, yes, I said it, than standard classroom English. Anyway, the truth is that woke is a participle. Its antonym is sleep, as in, is the baby asleep? So the idea of it meaning aware of injustice is not wordplay, it's just a regular-ass metaphor. The fact that people don't get this seemingly obvious fact is how you can have an entire political faction in the US simultaneously decrying wokeness and calling for a great awakening. Those two are the same thing. If you awaken, you're woke. But that's not the paradox. This is. That fundamental misunderstanding by virtue of sheer numbers has become the default meaning. The paradox is that African American English is a language variety spoken by strictly less than 12% of Americans, and it becomes the source of words for the other 88%. Because of the language ideologies that tell us that African American English is uneducated, lazy, and slang, and more importantly that African American English is not really its own conceptual thing at all, respecting the meaning of a word in the original language variety becomes impossible. Its origin is in some ways erased, and its meaning is transformed. And then the majority will, and in some ways correctly, tell the minority what their word means. Woke is a high-profile example, but this happens a lot with non-standard participles. Just like there's a difference between the US and UK in terms of whether we say dived or dove, AE has a bunch of participles that are different than classroom American English, and you've likely heard a bunch of them repurposed. For instance, shook. People will tell you I'm shook is wordplay or silly or a game or internet speech or teen speak or Gen Z, and for many people now it is those things, but its origin is unquestionably contact with African American English speakers using their direct equivalent of shaken. The baby can't be woke because she been shook. Too dark. Here's another one. Turnt. When that had its moment, with everyone who only knows black folks from reading tweets, I noticed a truly fascinating phenomenon. It was borrowed whole, meaning it was no longer transparently equivalent to turned up for a lot of people who used it, and then they had to talk around the grammatical structure. Instead of forming the future by saying they'll turn up, they instead had to come up with structures like get turned up. And again, turned is just a variation on the past, like burnt and burned. The babies sleep now that the light's turned out. Here's the paradox. Because African American English is simultaneously ignored and invisible and literally everywhere, any variation between AAE and classroom English becomes a source for slang in the non-Black, non-AAE speaking mainstream, where it gets uncoupled from what it meant and continues to mean in AAE. And because not even all Black people speak AAE and only 12% of the US is Black, and the overwhelming majority of non-Black people don't speak it or really even understand it, the new meaning becomes the overwhelmingly dominant mainstream meaning of the word. And words mean what people use them to mean, contrary to what grammar patents tell you. Ask any lexicographer. Now, I'm very reluctant to entertain any sort of claims of linguistic ownership or exclusive rights or anything. I just don't think that's how language works or how society works. But I do understand and respect the feeling of possessiveness, defensiveness, and loss that some Black folks express in these situations. Because think about this. A totally neutral word takes on a slightly positive sense in AAE, and in short order is effectively taken and ruined by everybody else. And with words like turnt and shook, they become cringe after a few years and are discarded. And yeah, politically charged words get misused and misunderstood by everybody all the time. But it feels like there's something a little bit different going on with woke compared to gentrification or intersectionality or even the now contentious pronouns mentioned. So those of you playing the home game, take a shot. But now it's your turn to let me know in the comments what you think. Have you noticed this too? Is this process of pejoration qualitatively different when it's not academic jargon, but a regular word from a socially stigmatized dialect? Let me know. All right, if you watched this far, you probably watched a mid-roll ad, and I really appreciate that. What I want to do is give you a bit of a treat. So I had initially planned this video to be a little short to leave room for an ad read for a sponsorship that flaked on me. And instead, what I decided to do is call up my friend Curtis Wright, CJ Wright, who is a producer. He has not made songs for such people as Paula Abdul, LL Cool J, and Busta Rhymes. And he told me I could say that. Anyway, I decided I wanted to do something like a remix from Stay Woke, Childish Gambino. And one thing led to another. He ended up creating an original piece of music. I decided to play over it. So it's not language per se, but I was a working musician for a decade, and it's hard to give it up completely. So here you go, a little bit of music to see us out at the end. Special thanks to all my patrons. If you'd like to become a patron, head on over to patreon.com/languagejones. You can also support the channel directly here on YouTube with super thanks or super chat on my live streams. If you liked this video, YouTube thinks that you'll probably like this one. Until next time, stay woke.